This is a devotional song sang and written by Meera. Devotee Meera praying to Lord Krishna for his vision. Beautiful face adorned with his head adorned with the peacock feather, wearing yellow garment, and she wishes his vision and wants to touch her feet. Re Prabhu Darshana De Giradha Hari Re Prabhu Darshana De Giradhari Sohani Surati Mohani Murati Sohani Surati Mohani Murati Kundalaki Gati Nyari Nyari Kundalaki Gati Nyari Nyari Re Prabhu Darshan De Giradhari Re Prabhu Darshan De Giradhari Mora Mukut Pe Tambar Sohe Mora Mukut Pe Tambar Sohe Pitambar Sohe Pitambar Sohe Mora Mukut Pe Tambar Sohe Adharan Murali Pyari Adharan Murali Pyari Re Prabhu Darshan De Giradhari Re Prabhu Darshan De Giradhari Meera kahe Prabhu Girdhar Nagar Meera kahe Prabhu Girdhar Nagar Girdhar Nagar Girdhar Nagar Meera kahe Prabhu Girdhar Nagar Charan Kamal Balihari Charan Kamal Balihari Re Prabhu Darshan De Giradhari Re Prabhu Darshan De Giradhari Sohani Surati Mohani Murati Sohani Surati Mohani Murati Kundalaki Gati
I'm glad to announce that today is a very special day for our Sunday service. We have a guest speaker. Since I went to Japan about 5 years ago, and I spoke with Catherine, and she spoke something about the religions in Japan. Since then I was searching an opportune moment when she will be here in Toronto and our session is on. And luckily, COVID has done so many bad things, but luckily because of that she came to meet her mother here. And she is here when our session is on. Otherwise she comes during summer vacation and we are closed. So we're very glad that Catherine is here, and she is the guest speaker today. Very learned scholar, and she lives in Japan, she teaches religion, and she, to her credit, is a great worth of studies. So I'll give you a short biography of hers, and then you will understand. Then we'll listen the wonderful talk. It's about religions in Japan. So Catherine Ludvik obtained a Ph.D. at the University of Toronto in the Center for the Study of Religion, and teaches Japanese religion, visual arts and culture at the Stanford Program in Kyoto, Stanford University. Spanning Indian and Japanese religions and their visual arts, her research interests focus on the metamorphoses of the originally Indian deities, most particularly the goddess Sarasvati, in texts, images, and rituals of Japan, as well as on ascetic practices and pilgrimage. She is the author of Hanuman in the Ramayana of Valmiki and the Ramacaritamanasa of Tulasi. Her book is published in 1994. Recontextualizing the Praises of a Goddess, published in 2006, and Sarasvati, Riverine Goddess of Knowledge, in 2007. Such an erudite scholar is among us, and we are so happy that we are having the Catherine Ludvik here among us, and I request her to present her speech today. We curtailed the reading and meditation also, we kept long so that she can speak longer. You have your own time, you can go on for 1 hour or whatever time you speak, and if you have time and want to ask, invite questions, that also are allowed. So about 10-15 minutes you can have the question answers if you permit, and if devotees have questions at the end of it all. Thank you and welcome, Catherine.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Swamiji, for the kind introduction. Today, in the spirit of the Vedanta Society's inclusiveness of all faiths, as we see here on the altar, not only do we have Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda, the Holy Mother, but also images of the Buddha and Jesus. So in this spirit of inclusiveness, I will be talking about Japanese religion and its the coexistence and actually the combination of faiths which form one Japanese religion rather than Japanese religions plural. Now, as my title indicates, I'll be talking about Shinto and Buddhism. And these are the mainstream religions. There are indeed other religions. Less than 1% of the population is Christian. And of course, there are Hindus in the country, and Muslims, and Jewish people, and a great many other faiths, including new religious movements and such. But the mainstream is very much Shinto, which is the native tradition of Japan, and Buddhism, which was introduced into Japan in the middle of the 6th century. So, could we go to the next slide, please? Since I think most people are at least a little bit familiar with Buddhism, but much less so with Shinto, the native tradition of Japan, I will begin with a brief introduction of Shinto, and I'll point out some of the influences Shinto on Buddhism, Buddhism on Shinto, and then talk about the coexistence and the combination of Shinto and Buddhism that we see not only at sites in Japan, but in people's homes, in people's lives, and in the practices and rituals that are performed in Japan. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So my slide here is about the different types of kami. Kami are the deities, the gods who are worshipped in Shinto. And there are different ways to, categorize them. This I find a kind of convenient fourfold category. Nature deities. Shinto is very closely connected with nature, both in the location of the shrines as well as in the types of deities who are worshipped. Ancestral deities, historical figures, and potentially vengeful deities. So if we could go to the next slide, and so I'll give you and illustrate some of the nature deities. So we have here sacred waterfalls, for example. So the waterfall is sacred in that a kami, a god, descends into the waterfall, but also the waterfall itself is considered to be a kami. You can see a sort of white gate at the base, and there is so this is a place to worship at the bottom. The Nachi waterfall is located, I live in Kyoto, which is in a little bit western Japan, central Honshu, and this is far to the south of Kyoto in Wakayama Prefecture near the seaside. So sacred waterfalls are one example of nature deities. Could we go to the next slide? So here in context, you see the same waterfall in the mountainous environment, and with the temple precincts in the foreground, so Buddhist temple in the foreground, and adjacent to it is a Shinto shrine where the waterfall is also worshipped at a distance. Okay, so next slide, please. Japan is 75% mountainous, and a great many of the mountains are worshipped as deities, as kami, and this is one of them. Many of you, I think, will know this because this is the tallest peak in Japan, Mount Fuji. And although today most people climb Mount Fuji as a kind of cultural experience to see the sunrise and as a kind of challenge to themselves, there are shrines at the base, shrines partway up, shrines at the top, and there are still religious groups who go up for reasons of worship. If we could go to the next slide, where we have the peak of the mountain and the shrine that is up there. So the mountain peak shrine over here at the bottom, and when the winter, it is the gate that you see here. The gate is called a Toji, and the top of the gate you're seeing on the top left, in the top left picture of the slide, entirely under the snow. So nobody goes up there in the depth of winter. The picture on the right also shows us the different types of people who go there. Not only do we see people in hiking wear who've climbed up the mountain, but also over on the right side and going through the Torii Gate, there are mountain ascetics who are going up as a spiritual practice, as a pilgrimage, for reasons of worship and practice. Okay, so the next slide is another sacred mountain, Mount Ishizuchi. And actually, we're looking at the mountain in the background, and in the foreground, we are actually at the shrine itself to the mountain. It's partway up the mountain. And there are glass windows at the back that show the mountain. So this really shows us that what is worshipped is the mountain itself and the presence of the kami, the gods, the deities in the mountain and as the mountain. If we could go to the next slide, thank you. Another example, Mount Miwa, which is not far from where I live. And Mount Miwa is also, the entire mountain is considered to be a deity. And there are a couple of shrines near the base, and then pilgrims climb up to the top. If we could go to the next slide, thank you. So here you see people who are about to go up. So top left photo, there is a little gate and a few stairs leading up to the top of the mountain. It takes about an hour to get up there. And people check in at the shrine and make a little donation, leave their bags. They receive, as you can see, something around their neck, which indicates that they are pilgrims going up for worship. And if you look carefully at the people in these photos, both on the top right and on the bottom left, you'll notice that they are barefoot. So not absolutely everybody goes up barefoot, but this is something that some people do and that has become increasingly popular in the last decade or so, as people do it as an act of worship, to get closer to the sacred mountain, and as a show of respect to the mountain, and also as an ascetic practice, because it is quite a climb up there. And to do it even with sneakers or hiking shoes, it takes a bit of effort. To be doing it barefoot, well, that's a whole other level. Okay, next slide, please. So we've seen sacred waterfalls, sacred mountains. We also have sacred trees. So here are two examples of sacred trees. So the kami, the gods, inhabit all of nature, but there are particular trees that are identified as residences as places where the kami, or the gods, dwell. And the way these trees can be identified is by the braided straw rope with zigzaggy white paper that hangs, that is basically tied around the tree. This is called a shimenawa, and it immediately alerts one to the presence of the sacred tree. So often these are ancient trees which are felt to have a divine presence in it. In some cases it can be trees that have been struck by lightning, and so with the lightning the deity comes into the tree. Let's see, could we go to the next slide? And even if the trees are no longer there, if they've been cut down, they are still considered to be sacred, as you see here, where we have actually a cluster of trees in Koryuji Temple in Ehime Prefecture, southwest of Japan, which continue to be worshipped, although the trees have been cut down. In addition then to waterfalls, mountains, and trees, we also have sacred rocks, sacred boulders, sacred islands, where the kami, the gods, which the gods inhabit and embody. And in the case that we see here, we have actually two trees connected to one another, me otoiwa, the husband and wife stones, rocks, and islands. And we have the shimenawa sacred rope that connects them, and a little tori gate on the top of the left one. Sometimes it's just one island, and it can be a small island that nobody goes to. There is simply a shrine on it, or a larger island which only a priest may go to for worship. There may be a bridge that goes across, and during special festivals, then you could have worshippers going across, but only at those times. So, sacred rocks. Can we see the next slide, please? And the Shimenawa sacred rope has to be changed periodically. And generally once a year, some places a little bit more. In Nachi, the first slide that I showed of the waterfall, it is a considerable effort, and you see the shrine priests who've made their way all the way up there and are changing the sacred rope, which becomes a part of the ritual activity as well. All right, if we could go to the next slide, thank you. Oops, previous, you jumped one. No? Okay, next one, I see. All right, so this is the largest Shimenawa, sacred rope indicating the presence of the kami that we have in Japan. 8 meters long and 1,500 kilograms, or over 3,000 pounds in weight. So to change this every year is an unimaginable effort that involves the entire community. And below we see a Shinto shrine priest and a shrine maiden at worship. Okay, next one. All right, so we've looked at examples of nature deities, and some of the nature deities have names, and some are simply sacred trees, and there is no particular name of a god, of a kami associated with it. A kami that is worshipped in particular among the nature deities is the sun goddess Amaterasu. And she doubles up also as an ancestral deity, or second category, where she is the ancestral deity of the imperial clan, so that is the Emperor of Japan. And she is the main place where she is worshipped. She is worshipped in many places in Japan, many sites, including in people's homes. But the main site of worship for her is this shrine here called Ise Jingu, Ise Shrine. And as you can see, it is surrounded by magnificent forests. And we're actually seeing 2 adjacent shrines. And this is because the shrine is rebuilt every 20 years. It takes 8 years to rebuild. And the rebuilding process involves a great many ritual activities, basically carpentry ritualized. And then the kami is moved, the deity is moved from one shrine to the newly built shrine, so that it is rejuvenated, reborn, and worshipped even more. And the older site is dismantled, and again, the process begins. So this has been going on for over 1,500 years, the rebuilding every 20 years. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we've looked at nature and ancestral deities where there are overlaps in the category. And now we looked at the next 2 categories, historical figures and potentially vengeful deities. So historical figures can be made into deities, into kami. And we have, for example, emperors. So if any of you have been to Tokyo, as Swamiji has been, yes? The Meiji Jingu Shrine is to the Emperor Meiji. Founders of political eras are also enshrined. And the 4th category, where we do have a little bit of an overlap, the potentially vengeful deities. These are figures of mostly human origin whose lives have not gone as planned. They may have died in battle, or some disaster has happened. So basically unnatural premature death has occurred, and their life has been unfulfilled, and victims of political intrigue. This is a big one, and I will explain an example of that shortly. So since they have died in somehow unfortunate circumstances or somehow unfulfilled, there is a concern that they could cause potential harm because their spirits are not calm. And so they are recognized, they are acknowledged, they are given a kami name, a god name, and they are shown respect, and in this way they become benevolent figures to the society. Okay, could we go to the next slide? Thank you very much. All right, so Kita no Tenmangu, this is a shrine in Kyoto where I live, and it is dedicated to a historical figure, Sugawara no Michizane of the 9th century, who was a poet, a scholar, and also a politician, because at the time, basically your advancement in your career as a politician depended on your knowledge and your ability to compose poetry. So an entirely different set of requirements for the job than we have today for politicians. And what happened is that during his life he was a victim of political intrigue, and as a result of that he was sent into exile to the southernmost island of Japan, Kyushu, and he was very unhappy. He missed terribly the beauty of Kyoto, the plum blossoms and the cherry blossoms of Kyoto, and he died there. And after he passed away, various disasters happened in connection with the people who were involved in the political intrigue, the sentiment to exile, and so it was thought that it was his spirit that was angry and needed to be appeased. And so he was given the name Tenjin, which is a celestial deity, and shrines called Tenmangu were built to him. And there are shrines to him actually all over the country. And here we see one of them. His shrines are associated with plum blossoms, because he wrote poems about plum blossoms. And you can see the blossoming tree on the top left. And also on the lantern on the left side, this represents the plum blossom. He is also associated with bulls, because he was born in the year of the cow or the bull, and there are various stories of how when he was sent into exile, bulls carried his books, and during the funerary procession, again, the bulls were involved. So there are always plum blossom symbols, as well as statues of bulls in shrines dedicated to him. And for the bulls, people go and rub the bull as a kind of healing ritual. Say they have a pain in some part of the body, they rub that part of the bull's body and their own body. But since Tenjin, Sugawara no Michizane, this particular deity, was turned into a god of scholarship and knowledge, because that is what he was in his lifetime, people often rub the bull's head and their own head so that they may get smarter. And so the shrines dedicated to him are often filled with students praying for success in exams, and especially entry exams into schools and such. Okay, next slide, please. So I now move on to Shinto shrines. So originally, Shinto shrines were not buildings at all. They were spaces, sacred spaces, in which a sacred tree or a stone would function as a place of descent, a receptacle for the kami to be called down into that object. The kami was invoked for the duration of the ritual and then sent off. So no physical buildings existed, right? So purely in nature. All right, next slide, please. The next stage is that a simple structure was put up because it was practical. Japan is a country where it rains a lot, so to have some kind of covering is useful. So what we see in the picture on the right is a ritual that would be performed for the construction of a new building. So still today, this exists, and a tent is put over the top, and an altar is set up, and when a new building is constructed, a ritual is performed so that the deities, the kami, are in the building, dwell in the building, and protect the building and the people who will live in it or who will work in it. The third stage of the Shinto shrines is when the roof structures were kept in place, and even after the worship, and that's when we get the permanent shrine buildings. And in that case, also the concept of the gods changes, because now the kami are, in a sense, permanently present, that whenever anybody comes, people can contact them, can pray to them. All right, next one, thank you. So we have a series of different architectural shrine styles, which identify them as what types of shrines they are. So for example, the top one, the Shinmei-zukuri, is shrine architecture for the sun goddess Amaterasu, and so on. Okay, next one. All right, so I'm going to just go through a few steps here, what the shrine looks like. So shrines have a gate called a tori, and so it separates the everyday space from the sacred space of the shrine. And some of them are painted in orange, which is believed to ward away evil, and some remain just plain colored wood. Most of the tori are in wood, others are in different materials, like concrete, metal, and so forth. So, entrance to the shrine. Next slide, please. In some cases, this place here, Itsukushima Jinja, is a World Heritage Site near Hiroshima. And the island, the entire island, was believed to be a kami, so that people did not step on the island. They would arrive on boats, they would go through the tori, and they would worship from the sea. The shrine at the base actually floats on water. And nowadays, of course, this has changed, that people take ferries, they come across, and they are on the island and worship at the shrines and temples of the island and visit the island. So during high tide, that's the picture on the right, the tori is in the water, underwater, and on the left side, during low tide, it's possible to actually walk up to it. And you can already see here that there are different styles of tori as well. Next slide, please. So amongst the different styles of tori, there is this type here, the Sanno tori. Sanno is the mountain gods, or mountain king, which refers to gods of the mountain, tori. And as you can see, there's a kind of triangular form at the top. And what this is this particular shrine, Hiyoshi Taisha, is at the base of a mountain, Mount Hiei, located to the northeast of Kyoto. On the mountain is a Buddhist temple complex, the center of the Tendai sect of Buddhism. And at the base of the mountain is this enormous Shinto shrine that protects the mountain and that worships the mountain as a kami. Because of the Buddhist temple complex on the top of the mountain and the Shinto shrine at the base, the tori is made in the form of a triangle which represents the mountain on the one hand. Another interpretation is that it represents putting your hands together and indicating that the two are one, right? Buddhism and Shinto coming together. All right, next one. There are also two storied gates at Shinto shrines, and this is entirely coming out of Buddhism. Buddhist temples have two-storied gates with guardians in the gates. And can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. So the Buddhist gates of the guardian are the Vajrapani. So we've got, they're called Nyo in short in Japanese, muscular figures who guard the gate. And on the top right, you have the Shinto shrine guardians who are dressed in Japanese clothing and carry bow and arrow. All right, next slide. Okay. Upon entering the shrine itself, so having gone through the Storied Gate, the two Storied Gate, one gets to a place of purification. So the purification fonts are originally Shinto, but are now found also in Japanese Buddhist temples. And so the one on the top right is in a very, very famous, actually Japan's most famous Shinto shrine, Fushimi Inari. And what people do is, or did in the past, was to take a ladle, scoop up water, pour it in one hand, pour it on the other hand, and by washing the hands, the heart is purified, right? So it is a physical and a spiritual preparation for approaching the kami and for doing worship. The bottom left photo actually says washing the heart, and it is at a Buddhist temple with a Buddhist monk, Kobayashi Kukai, who is standing there as a pilgrim. Okay, next slide. So I bring it a little bit from the pandemic because this is a very interesting development, and it also shows us how religion is alive and vibrant. So during the pandemic, to be handling the ladles was out of the question, that everybody should be touching the same thing. So what to do? So one option was to close down the fonts altogether, to cover them. And some of the shrines put some disinfectant spray. Now, as you can imagine, this is very medical, sterilized, and it just doesn't do it as a spiritual purification. So next step, next slide. Next idea they had was to have the water basically coming out of little bamboo tubes off the edge where people could put their hands under or bring their own ladles and purify themselves. However, things continued. The font of water was now not used, and it became a place where people's creativity could come alive, and flower arrangements began to be made with the ladles just placed there very beautifully. And so this is at a Shinto shrine in Kyoto where you see the flowers are practically growing out of it. And could we see the next slide? So this is at a Buddhist temple, also near Kyoto, and magnificent flower arrangements were made with flowers of the season, changed periodically. This actually originated at this temple a few years before the pandemic. And when the pandemic started, everybody started to do this. So we now have lists of the best sites in Kyoto to go to actually see these magnificent flower arrangements at the purification fonts. And because when people see this, it's so beautiful that it is refreshing and just it makes people feel good. So it's a kind of purification in itself just to see it. And it is said to originate from the flowers. The use of flowers is said to originate from the use of the dew of the flowers for purification. All right, next slide. Okay, main shrine buildings. So Shinto shrines have basically two buildings that are connected with one another and that function as three spaces. The one on the left side, that's the front one, the worship hall. In the center, there are some shelves for the offerings. And over on the back building on the right is where the kami, the god, resides. Next slide, please. So here's the worship hall. The worship hall consists in the outside space as well as in the inside space. So in the outside space, people come, they make a small offering in the box, they ring the bell, they bow once slightly, second time more deeply, clap twice, do their prayer, and bow again. Next slide, please. And this is the inside, where you see some benches. So people who have asked for rituals to be performed by a shrine priest will be ushered in, and the priest arrives, purifies them, and performs a ritual. So that's the worship hall. Next slide. Offerings. So the offerings, many kinds of offerings are found, including the seasonal fruits and vegetables, the rice, water, also sake, which is basically the rice wine because it comes out of the rice, and seaweed actually, and in some cases you also see fish that is offered to the kami. And the kami halls are over in the back, so you can have just one hall, or you can have, as in this case, there's 4 little buildings that are there. You cannot see the inside. The halls are closed. And if we could go to the next slide. So the forms of the kami. First of all, the kami is not shown, the form of the kami, right? That is what is traditional. However, if you have a tree or a boulder or a mountain or a waterfall, of course you will be able to see it. Often the kami is in a symbolic object like a mirror that is wrapped up in nice paper and put into a box, wrapped up in nice paper and put into another box, and so on, and then placed into the room where the kami resides, and nobody sees it, right? On the right side we actually have statues, and this is Buddhist influence. So under the influence of Buddhism, which has statues, paintings of the Buddhas and other figures of the Buddhist pantheon, statues of the kami were also made. And so we have form, but they are not shown within their own spaces where they are worshipped. Okay. Could we go back just one more time? Form and concealment. This is where what we see here is not only the influence of Buddhism on Shinto in the forms of the kami, but we also see the influence of Shinto on Buddhism in that there are many Japanese Buddhist temples where there are something that's called hibutsu, hidden Buddhas. Buddhist statues that are not shown, that may be shown once a year, once every X number of years. It could be as much as every 36 years or over 100 years. And so Shinto has also had an influence on Buddhism. Okay, next one. So here I'm going to talk about Shinto and Buddhism, their coexistence and their combination. So kami worship, the worship of the Shinto gods, of course, is found in Shinto, but it is also found in Japanese Buddhism. Shinto shrines are found within Buddhist temple complexes. And we also can see Buddhist worship that is done at Shinto shrines. And I'm going to illustrate all of this in a moment. Can we go to the next slide? In terms of people's lives, people go to both Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples. And this combination and coexistence of the two is what very much characterizes the mainstream of Japanese religion, but beyond religion, culture, and social life, family life, to the point that people do not identify what they do when they visit shrines and temples as religion, because it is so much a part of the culture and the social and family life. All right, so let me illustrate this. Next slide, thank you. So in people's homes, so in the multi-generational family systems where people lived together in the houses, there was a kamidana, a kami altar on the left side. So this is the Shinto gods who are enshrined. And on the right side, there was also a Buddhist altar connected with actually the ancestors, the family members who were enshrined here and prayed to, together with an image of the Buddha. Nowadays, because we have nuclear families, people travel, people move to different places for work and other reasons, So not everyone will have both of these in the home. And when this gets transferred from one generation to the next, it often is the oldest child, usually the oldest son, who takes the altars over. Okay. So this is Toji Buddhist temple in Kyoto. And so you can see a pagoda in the bottom picture and the Buddhist temple gate right on the right side of the photo. But adjacent to it, you've got two roofs with a little bit of orange there, and that is a Shinto shrine. What Shinto shrine? The one that's on the top right. Hachimangu Shinto Shrine within Toji Buddhist temple. And this is extremely common to have a Shinto shrine within a Buddhist temple, possibly more than one Shinto shrine. In the case of Toji, there are two very close to one another. Next slide. Okay, and this is the same Shinto shrine, and what we see here is a Buddhist ceremony taking place. So a Buddhist priest in Buddhist robes from this temple, Buddhist temple, is performing a homa, a fire ceremony, which in Japan is called a goma. And he is facing the back building where the kami resides, and he is doing it Buddhist style. So how does that work out? Well, it works out in the sense that there is, without making this too complicated, there's a relationship between the kami and the Buddhas. The Buddhas were thought to be the original forms, and the kami were thought to be their manifestations. And they were paired up one-on-one, so you can worship a kami using the original Buddha's mantra, and that works. All right, next slide. This is Mount Koya, a fantastic mountain complex far to the south of Kyoto, where I go monthly actually. And within the monastic mountain complex where the main buildings are located, at the back there is a large Shinto shrine that you see in this picture here. And this was actually the first set of buildings that was constructed when the Buddhist monk who established the complex, the Buddhist temple complex up here to train monks in the 9th century, that's the first construction that took place to build. Of course, this was rebuilt many times, but in the 9th century, when he came up on the mountain, what did he do? He did not build the Buddhist structures first. He first built the Shinto shrine. The Shinto shrine has a central place in the worship of the mountain, the temples on the mountain, and in fact, the entire sect of Shingon Buddhism of Japan. The most senior monks of the sect who are on the mountain, in order to reach the highest stage, they have to go through 1 year of service to the kami, to the Shinto gods. Examination ceremonies take place in the building that is in front of this shrine, so that they are presented to the kami, and the kami are like the examiners. So a complete integration of the worship of kami in Buddhism, in Japanese Buddhism. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so here's a Shinto shrine that is to the east of Kyoto, Hiyoshitaisha. This is the one I showed before with the kind of triangular form over the torii. So Hiyoshitaisha Shrine, located at the base of Mount Hiei, which at the top has a Buddhist temple complex, headquarters of a sect of Buddhism. So, and on the right side, you can see one of the shrine, Shinto shrine buildings. So top floor, the kami are there. The bottom floor, you can see a door on the right side. That is the Buddhist statue room. The Buddhist statue today is no longer there, but it used to be. And it basically illustrates this idea that the Buddhas are the original ground, the original forms, and the kami are their manifestations. On the left side, you see a ritual that's being performed, And I've circled in red the people who are sitting there. So under the tent on the right are the Shinto priests. Under the roof structure on the left side are the Buddhist priests of the mountain. And they are performing a Buddhist service on a Buddhist sutra, the Lotus Sutra, reciting it. And the Shinto priests have their role in this, the Buddhist priests have their role, and they come together to perform this ceremony. Okay? All right, so this is again at the same shrine, Hiyoshitaisha. And what we see here is, again, circled in red at the top right, are the Shinto priests of the shrine. And the white-robed figure, who is both on top and at the bottom, and has a very long rolled-up hat, which represents a rolled-up lotus, is a Buddhist monk of the Tendai sect, who is in the midst of his 1,000-day circumambulation practice. So this is a practice where the monks circumambulate the mountain over a period of 7 years for 1,000 days, and this is the equivalent of circling the globe. And in their circumambulation, so it's a pilgrimage, it's an act of worship. They worship at over 250 sites. And it is also, they also, as they walk, when they're not worshiping at a temple hall, or actually a shrine hall or a grave, they are repeating a mantra, right? So this is a moving meditation. And whenever they come out to places at the base or around the mountain, or in Kyoto, as part of their practice where people live, people will gather and kneel and wait for their blessings. So this is what you're seeing down here, is the blessings. Now, this shows us that the shrine priests are there, and I quite regularly walk with these monks through Kyoto. They do this once a year, at least pre-pandemic, and I'm assuming it might happen this year, or latest next year again, where anybody can join them, wear white, and go with them through the city, circling Kyoto city, going to the shrines and temples of the city and praying with them. And whenever we go into a shrine, a Shinto shrine, the Shinto shrine priest is waiting for us and welcoming us, and in fact directing worshipers where to sit, what to do, how to be in the, not so they're not in the way, in the right place. So it's this cooperative coexistence and fantastic relations between the two. Okay, next one. So this is another Shinto shrine in Kyoto, Tatsumi Jinja, and we see the same, one of these circumambulating monks of the Tendai sect with a long rolled-up lotus hat, who, as he circumambulates through Kyoto and stops at many Buddhist temples, Shinto shrines, at this shrine he's performing a fish releasing ceremony. Which means basically, so it's a Buddhist ceremony performed in front of a Shinto shrine, then the fish are scooped up in these buckets, right? And everybody gets a turn to do this and pours the fish into the stream that runs nearby. So the fish are not food. And also this represents the release, the liberation, the enlightenment, the awakening of all beings. Okay, next one. All right, so this is my last site over here, and good timing. All right, Sikisan Zenin is a Tendai sect Buddhist temple in the northeast corner of Kyoto, and very colorful place, as you can see. Now, so it's a Buddhist temple, but the main hall, which is located just as you go through this rosary gate and where you see the roof. And who is the main deity worshipped? Not a Buddha, but actually a kami, a Shinto deity. And in fact, it gets even more complicated because this Shinto deity is not even from Japan. He's from China. Buddhist monk from the mountain, went to China to study, felt he was protected by a Chinese religion mountain god, And when he came back to Japan, he wanted to have a place of worship for this god whom he felt protected him. And this god was absorbed into amongst the Shinto gods and also into Japanese Buddhism and is worshipped here. And I end with a last slide over here with the 7 gods of good fortune who are worshipped basically all over Japan in many places, and also at Sekisan Zenin Temple. And these 7 gods of good fortune are a really good illustration of Japanese religion, because it is 3 of the gods are from India, 3 are from China, 1 is from Japan, but might actually be from Korea. And among the 3 that are from India, we have Sarasvati, who is on the right side. So Sarasvati is called Benzaiten in Japan. And she's worshipped in various different forms, but basically she was introduced to Japan in the 7th and then 8th century through Buddhist texts, where she was a goddess of eloquence and knowledge. And she was worshipped as a protector of the Dharma, of the Buddhist teaching, of Buddhism. And then by the 12th century, she was identified with human-headed, snake-bodied deity of food, whose origins are both with the kami, the Shinto gods of Japan, but also with the Indian Nagas, and who ends up represented on her head, right? So rather complicated. The picture is cut off over here, but you can see just coming up over on this side are the 2 legs of a tori. There's a tori gate on her head, and behind it is the deity Ugajin, who resides up there. So the combination, once again, in a single form of a goddess, originally Hindu river goddess, right? Then we have her introduced into Buddhism, brought to China, brought to Japan, and then more development still, right? So I end here with the 7 gods of good fortune and a connection with India. Thank you so much for your attention. Oh, yes, of course, yeah.
Hi, Catherine.
Yes?
So how are these 2 religions come together? How they came together?
Mm-hmm.
Shinto and Buddhism,
Mm-hmm.
what brought them together?
Well, Buddhism was introduced to Japan in the middle of the 6th century, and the kami were worshipped in Japan, right? And so basically the various clans of Japan worshiped their ancestral deities in ways that were similar to each other, so the kami are there. Then Buddhism is introduced, and as Buddhism adapts wherever it goes, yeah? So in Japan, it adapted by incorporating and combining with the existing gods, which made it more accessible to people. And then they devised complicated theories about the relationship of the Buddhas and kami. And basically, we're not really talking about 2 religions, we're talking about 1 religion, because there were always shrines and temples adjacent to one another, forming complexes, combined complexes, where Shinto covered the life of the clan, right? And the Buddhist temple was very often connected not only with also the concerns of life, and for the Buddhist monks, concerns of gaining awakening, but also with the deceased, right? So you've got the Shinto Shrine that is connected with the life of people, and the Buddhist temple which covers death and also many other things. We have the saying, they have the saying in Japan that born Shinto, die Buddhist, because they have different functions, right? And so they came together quite simply with the arrival of Buddhism and, the coexistence. I showed the example of the Mount Koya temple complex with a huge shrine at the back, where the Buddhist priest, Kobodaishi Kukai, began construction up there by building the Shinto Shrine. Well, in order for him to take over the mountain and use it as a place to train his Buddhist monks in study of Buddhist scriptures and practice, he asked permission of the kami of the mountain. So you have to respect what's there, right? And that was incorporated fundamentally into the life at the temple. And, with this faith that pre-existed the arrival of the Buddhist temple complex on this mountain as a specific example, you cannot just ignore what's there. And very wisely, many of the founders of the sects also, if they arrived somewhere and were to establish something, you don't just scrape, get rid of whatever's there and start something new. You've got local people who are there are local beliefs, and if the monks themselves are locals, they themselves also have those beliefs. So it kind of naturally comes together. But with time, it develops into more and more complex texts and rituals which combine the Buddhas and the kami, and which give the Buddhist priests also different categories of Buddhist priests resided in different places. So some would be in Buddhist temples, and some actually resided in Shinto shrines and had particular functions within the Shinto shrines. So this is how they came together. But in 1868, with the restoration of the emperor to power and Shinto being made the national religion, it was a period of persecution of Buddhism, and this sort of combinatory and harmonious coexistence could not continue. The two were separated artificially, and sites which had both Buddhist aspects and Shinto aspects had to decide overnight which they were going to become. So this happened in 1868, lasted a short time, was completely ineffective because it did not represent the history of what was going on in Japan and people's faith. So people were doing things, on their own, and eventually things went back to a kind of combinatory system, and to this day there are rituals that are revived with the cooperation of Shinto priests and Buddhist priests. Yes?
Which religion the royal family practice in Japan?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Royal family of Japan, which religion they practice?
The imperial family? The imperial family they are connected with Shinto, right? Because they've got the imperial ancestor is the sun goddess Amaterasu. So this is what they are doing. However, right? So yes, they go to Ise Jingu Shrine. Yes, it is connected with Shinto. And so there is this. But they also visit Buddhist temples. And this is on TV all the time. Anytime that they go to a Buddhist temple and they attend Buddhist rituals, their presence is there. You have to think that it's not just a matter of religion, it's a matter of culture, of society, and of life itself. So there's no way to actually make a clear cut and say, okay, so the imperial family, because it is the imperial family, because they are believed to be descended from the sun goddess Amaterasu, they only do the Shinto thing. No. they will also go and to Buddhist temples to attend and talk with the Buddhist priests and so on. Okay.
What about the
I have two questions. One is, you said among the Hindu deities they worship like Sarasvati. What are the other two deities?
Oh,
Yes.
go ahead. Please go ahead.
And the second one is, what about the Christian festival? Like, do they celebrate the Shinto and Buddhism? They are the mainly followers. What is their view about celebration of, like, we have the Christmas here? Do they celebrate?
Okay. So there are many originally Hindu deities that are worshipped in Japan, right? So we have Sarasvati, but we also have Ganesha, for example, who is worshipped as Kangiten. Now, amongst the 7 gods of good fortune, the other 2 are Daikokuten, who is Mahakala, the great black one, whose origins go back to the god Shiva. And in Buddhism, in Indian Buddhism, he was worshipped in kitchens, and the images turned black, and that's why he started to be called Mahakala, which is literally translated as Daikokuten. And in Japan, he's connected with basically rice cultivation and good business. Yeah. And the other one is Bishamonten, who is Vaishravana, who goes back to Kubera. And he is an armored figure who holds up a pagoda, which represents Buddhism. He is a protector of the Dharma of Buddhism in Japan. So these are just a few, but there's also Lakshmi, who was worshipped as Kichijoten. She came in together with Sarasvati and was actually even more popular than Sarasvati initially. Yeah. And a great many others. Yeah. So there's this. And then the second question was about Christian festivals. Yes? Okay. So the Christmas is something, Japanese love festivals. So anything they can celebrate, yes, let's do it. So Christmas is celebrated. It's a commercial thing indeed, but people also eat Christmas cake, exchange gifts, go out to dinner, yes. Christmas are celebrations I've attended. Mom and I have attended Christmas celebrations at a Buddhist temple a couple of times, where Holy Night was sung, I think the Our Father prayer was also recited, and Christmas was celebrated and headed by the Buddhist priest of the temple. You can see also, I saw on the internet Buddhist priests with like Santa Claus hats and red jackets on. So the place that I have been to is certainly not the only one. So indeed, Christmas can be celebrated in some temples if they choose to do so. Easter, no, I don't see Easter very much at all. Yeah. So other Christian festivals, Valentine's Day, Saint Valentine, right? But I think we've completely forgotten that Valentine's Day has anything to do with Christianity as is. But for some reason, the Japanese are kind of, they have a little bit more consciousness where it's Saint Valentine. But neither Christmas nor Valentine's Day are, in most cases, celebrated as if it were something that is deeply religious. It's something that people enjoy to do and they take part in. There is also weddings. The most popular type of wedding is Christian style wedding. Style, I emphasize, right? And this is a matter of style rather than of faith. So people make choices in what they do. On the other hand, if we look at what are the Christians doing, are they, going to the Buddhist temples and the Shinto shrines and doing this? It depends how committed they are. and what the pressures are within the family. You simply cannot get rid of the kami shelf and of the Buddhist altar in the home. So there are cases of Christians taking part in this. Then there is the Shichigo-san, the 7-5-3 festival, where children aged 5 through 7 are dressed up, either Japanese style or Western style. And first this was done at, initially, Shinto shrines. Then Buddhist temples do it too. And now they do it at churches, I noticed, as well. So, there's a little bit of that. But if somebody is, very, very committed to Christianity, monotheistic religion, so they, I have had students in the past, a couple of them, who grew up Christian and who ended up taking my class and saying, I really want to know about this. I missed out on all of this because we were Christian and I wasn't allowed to go to even festivals.
And my last question, you have written a book on Hanuman.
Yes.
So, do you teach Hinduism in Japan in your classes, or it's your own interest that you studied about Hanuman's life and you wrote a book on Hanuman?
Okay, so Hanuman was my MA thesis, so this is a long time ago. And I really did not know anything much about Japan at the time, just sort of bare basics. And actually, after I finished writing the MA thesis, this is the first time that Mom and I went to Japan and discovered Japan, yes? So this is something that came before. And do I teach Hinduism in Japan? I do teach a class on India, and I certainly talk about the Ramayana there. And I also talk about Hanuman, because Hanuman has had an influence on how can I explain this in a simple way? So there was this 7th century monk, Xuanzang, who went from China to India to study, to Sanskrit and scriptures, right? So he was at Nalanda University, came back with many Buddhist scriptures to China. And he wrote a diary of his travels as requested by the emperor. And many stories were told about his travels because, at the time he had to do a lot of things on foot, horseback, on elephants, crossing high mountains, etc. So his incredible adventures became the source of legends. And eventually, these stories were collected together into a book called the Shioji, where suddenly he was the monk who, on his journey to India, who was accompanied by a monkey and a couple of other figures. And this was extremely popular, also is extremely popular in China, Japan, East Asia in general. It's also in anime, manga, and so forth. And the monkey in there is a monkey, the creation of the figure of the monkey derives both from Hanuman as well as from Chinese monkey figures. Yes?
Just one question. What do the Shinto priests, what do they believe in? Do they believe in, again, like Buddhist monastery, which is liberation, or it's simply just worshipping the deities?
Okay. So it is about worshipping the deities. Shinto there isn't a particular scripture. Yes, there are prayers, but Shinto entails action, expressions of respect, of reverence to the kami, to the gods. All of nature, the Japanese islands, even basically the people descend from the kami, so it's a recognition of that, living in harmony with that, showing respect to that, and it's about this world. It's not about what happens after. They don't really deal with the death part, except in some of the myths. But anyway, there is no complicated theology that is there. And so they're not seeking for awakening, enlightenment. They're in the moment, and they serve the people. They perform ceremonies where they invoke the gods. they counsel people, and yes, that's what is done. All right, thank you very much.
On behalf of the Vedanta Society of Toronto, I would like to thank Captain Ludvik for enlightening us on the Japanese religion, and all of you for attending the talk today. Now for some announcements of our upcoming events. Our next Sunday talk will be given by Swami at 11 o'clock. Friday scripture class will be on April 1st. It will be on Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. The title of next Sunday talk will be Maryada Purushottam. Ram Navami will be celebrated on April 10th at 11 a.m. and Buddha Jayanti on May 8th at 11 a.m. You are invited to attend all these events with your family and friends. Now after the closing chant, please join us upstairs for prasad. Thank you.
So I personally like to thank Catherine for agreeing to give a talk on my request in her short visit to Toronto. She'll be leaving for Japan just in 1 or 2 days from now. And it was such a wonderful knowledge-filled about Japan's religion and their culture. So we are really very much enlightened in that aspect about the Japanese people, about the similarity between Shinto faith and our religion, where we also try to see in Vedanta the divine in everything, in water, in river, in stone, in trees, divine's presence, sarvam khalu idam brahma. And the exactly same thing is practiced in Shintoism. It's so wonderful to feel the similarity, and how even the deities of Hinduism has traveled to Japan, and they're worshipped in Buddhist shrines. So how we feel that it is thus human beings are same all over, and we really are one, and we worship one God in different forms, and it all unifies the humanity of the whole world, of all faiths together. Vedanta concept is re-emphasized by understanding about Shintoism and Buddhism as practiced in Japan, that ekam sad viprabhahudha vadanti, the sat, the reality is one. So it's re-emphasized by your talk and knowing about the religions in Japan that is practiced. So with these words I'd like to conclude with the closing chants. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Jai Mahamai Ki Jai. Jai Swami Ji Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Jai Bhagavan Buddha Ki Jai. Jai Isha Musha Ki Jai. Sarvastaratu Durgani Sarvo Bhadrani Pashyatu Sarvasad Buddhimapnotu Sarvas Sarvatra Nandatu. Hari Om Tat Sat. May all be freed from dangers. May all realize what is good. May all be actuated by noble thoughts. May all rejoice everywhere. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us.